Christmas is a season of celebration, of love, of smiles, hugs, and gentle kisses. A period when even the worst of people feel the most tender, and the kind hearted can't even hold in their good nature. From the weather itself, the feel of snow, the breath of mist, and the sensation of cold. Oh, it's such a lovely time of year. However, it's way beyond just candy, rainbows, and lollipops, my fellow supernatural detectives. Dad sets up the Christmas tree and decorations. Mom prepares those nose destroying and brain turning dishes. You find yourself asking, what exactly could possibly go wrong? A good question, considering what lurks just beyond the shadows. An entity beyond the mere comprehension of man's infinitesimal knowledge. You could call it a demon. You could say it's a spirit of vengeance. But over here, we see these things as natural, a necessity. After all, the supernatural is our natural. This is the reason I have a story to tell you today. One that might just change your very perspective on the subject of Christmas. You think you've got that Christmas spirit? Well, be prepared. Kenneth had always been a lonely child, having no friends to play with or no idea of how to even get a friend. It's basically safe to say he was utterly alone. Does he have parents? Of course he does. But being the profession freaks they are, they barely even have his time, let alone notice how much he's really suffering inside. He did have one friend though, the man at the library who always indulged in his whims. Kenneth was a child lacking supervision, attention, or even friends. The perfect recipes for a disastrous child. He loved the occultic and satanic, found such topics in articles about satanic rituals and operations to be intriguing and fun. Mr. Kane, the library keeper, always made sure the occultic section of the library was always stocked and up to date with the most recent of articles and books on the satanic. He was basically Kenneth's drug supplier if the drugs were an unhealthy obsession with the satanic. Kenneth himself was a stout child. Some of you may call that chubby. Others might downright say he's fat. Either way, he certainly wasn't lacking in the weight department. He attended the town's only school and was just finishing up his junior year. For a boy at 14, things seemed to be pretty mundane and underwhelming. Now that we've covered all of that, let's get straight to the point of this story. See, a week after his last visit to the library, Kenneth, his family, and everyone in the world actually were all preparing for the holidays. It was Christmas season, and things seemed to be lively, and the mood was definitely up. Kids all over were overjoyed and could be seen running all over, making joyful sounds and chittering like rats who just hit the jackpot on a food-filled kitchen. In Kenneth's family, well, they definitely were no different from others, except for Kenneth himself. This was the one time of year his parents actually made time for him, and he absolutely hated it because they always found ways to overcompensate their absence for the rest of the year. Like it's that simple, Kenneth said as he entered his room with his door closing behind him and the background noise of his mom calling out and saying, "We'll be going to the store in 5 minutes. Get ready on time so we can get you whatever you want for the holidays, my dear." Kenneth dragged his duck-shaped flops along the smooth wooden floor of his parents' state-of-the-art home. It wasn't by any means the largest or the flashiest of houses, but it was definitely one of the most comfortable ones, with 4 bedrooms, a huge living room, a spacious kitchen, and even a game room, which Kenneth had no business with. I'm not interested in any of these childish and pathetic things other foolish kids are so crazy about. He'd shake his head in disgust as he passed through the game room. At the present, he was looking at his reflection in the mirror with his toothbrush in hand. He'd always felt incomplete and like a puzzle with a huge part of himself missing. As he stared deep into his reflection, he tried hard to see if he could find out what that missing part really was. After a few moments, he gave up and got ready for the store. This has got to be fun, he thought to himself as he exited his room and walked down the stairs to join his parents. Just as he passed by the corridor leading to the floor of the stairs, he saw a flash of movement in his periphery. He turned back and just ahead, there in the dark, he thought he could see the silhouette of something big and round standing in the corridor. He could see two yellow dots staring right at him. But that was impossible. Why, you ask? Well, those two yellow dots staring at Kenneth were almost at roof level, exactly 15 feet from the floor. He wiped his eyes and looked once more, only to see nothing there. He sighed and went to join his parents downstairs. At the store, he pretty much was just a spectator as he completely zoned out and was already praying for the shopping to be over already when he spotted the book section of the store. "Kenneth, would you like a new pair of stockings?" his mom called out. "Or maybe a new football," his dad said. "It's Christmas season, Dad. It's gonna be pouring snow real soon. No one's gonna be out playing football. Besides, I have no one to play with." Kenneth's dad replied, surprised by his son's answer. "Oh, I'll look for something better then." Kenneth had already walked off to the book section, unaware of anything else. It's almost like he was being called. He looked at the sacks and racks of books displayed on shelves. They had a lot of them: comics, magazines, journals, even school textbooks, all of which, as you might have guessed, repulsed him. He looked to the left side and saw a book that caught his undivided attention. "The True Evil of Christmas" was the title on the cover of the book. It felt strange holding the book, almost like the book was made out of something other than just paper. Kenneth was so fascinated by this gem of a book, he didn't notice his dad walking towards him. "Hey there, Tiger," his dad called. He broke from his trance and turned in surprise to see his dad standing behind him. "I see you picked something out already." His dad moved closer to study the book. His eyes squinted at the sides once he read the title, but he quickly smiled and said, "Is this really what you want?" Kenneth was so impatient now, he shouted. His dad did a double take in surprise, as the voice that emanated from his son's lungs was anything but a 14-year-old's. If you are a fan of the spooky, the bizarre, and the phenomenal, delivered to you in history and story format, well, there is a small and little request I'd like you to achieve for me. Like the channel, subscribe, and comment on each and every one of our videos. Now, let's get back to the story. "Are you okay?" "Yes, Dad. I'm sorry." His dad looked at him and said while smiling, "It's all good. Let's head home now that you've got what you want." "Yeah," Kenneth said, his eyes still transfixed on the book. When they arrived home later that day, Kenneth went up straight to his room to be alone with his new and intriguing discovery. He jumped straight on his bed and began drowning himself in its endless pages. His dad talked to his mom about what happened at the store. She looked worried. I think he's just going through a phase. He'll get better as he grows up. His dad, still worried, said, I hope so. The next few days were a slice of heaven for Kenneth. He barely had the need to even leave his room, let alone go outside. It was 2 days to Christmas, and his parents were getting worried because he'd even been skipping meals to have more time for his book. That night, his mom walked silently to his door and stood at the entrance. The door was partially open, and she could swear she heard him talking to someone just a few moments ago. She stood still and didn't even realize she was holding her breath out of fear. She peeked in through the space and was met with the stare down of her entire life. A goat-like creature was standing at the foot of her son's bed and seemed to be the one he was locked in a serious conversation with. It stared at her even through the little space she peeped in through. She couldn't help but feel like it had sensed her presence. The creature stood up, moved closer to the door, and disappeared in a woof. She screamed at the top of her lungs upon seeing that, kicked the door of her son's room open, and found him staring at her like she just disturbed something very important. He stood up and screamed, "Get out! Get out!" and slammed the door in his mom's face. By the time she got downstairs, she met her husband walking briskly towards the stairs with a baseball bat. "What happened up there?" he asked. She still looked shocked. "Jenna, what happened?" he repeated. She told him all that happened. He stood stunned for a while, then told his wife to go wait for him in the bedroom as he went to check up on Kenneth. He couldn't help but notice the air had a thick, musky feel to it. The closer he got to his son's room, the stronger the pungent odor of sulfur or something rotting away became. He covered his nose to keep this nauseating smell at bay. He knocked on Kenneth's door, calling out, "Kenneth, buddy, you okay in there?" He pushed the door open and found Kenneth standing, facing away from him. The pungent smell seemed to be the strongest in this room. "Kenneth, what's wrong?" No response. He surveyed the room and found the book from the store laying open at Kenneth's bed. The page was stained with blood. Matter of fact, it seemed the entire room was filled with blood. He blinked and it was all gone. The blood. He examined the book closely and it seemed to be pulsating like something was moving under its skin. Yes, skin. Now that he thought about it, the book didn't feel like it was made from paper when he last touched it. From fear, he quickly turned his attention to Kenneth, who was still facing away from him. "Hey, Kenneth." He touched his shoulder and he could feel how cold his son was. He dragged him out of the room, locked the door, and arranged for Kenneth to sleep in a different room that night. Before he left for bed that night, he took a long look at Kenneth, who still hadn't said a word yet. He closed the door and walked to his room where his wife was waiting for him. He closed the door behind him, rested his back against the door, and sighed. "Did you notice anything?" his wife asked. "Oh, I saw something, all right," he said. "But I think things will be okay for now." "I hope so," Kenneth's mom said. While they were in the room, Kenneth suddenly sat up in his bed and surveyed the room he was in. He could have sworn he heard someone call his name a moment ago. "Hey, Kenneth," he heard the voice say. "Down here." Looking on the floor, Kenneth discovered the book that was left in his room, right here, like it had moved here all on its own. He smiled, picked it up and opened its diabolical-looking pages. The voice whispered to him again, "It is time." Later that night, Kenneth's parents were woken up by the smell of burning wood. They opened the door of their bedroom and found out that the entire house was on fire. Seeing this, they rushed out and tried to get to Kenneth's room as fast as possible. His dad was the first to get into the corridor leading to Kenneth's room, only to find him amidst flames in the living room with the book in his hands. He didn't even seem to be bothered by the fire all around him. His mom came in too and screamed at the sight. Everything had gone up in flames. "Kenneth, what are you doing? Did you start this? Are you okay?" his dad called out to him. "I am not Kenneth," a voice responded, but it wasn't Kenneth's. It actually sounded like it came from behind him. Through the smoke, the hulking silhouette of a huge creature could be seen, its yellow eyes piercing, its huge horns menacing, its body the size of 3 men. Kenneth's dad grabbed his wife and tried to get them out, much to her protest. But even with that, the flames had already surrounded them. There was nowhere to run. The figure behind Kenneth moved forward while saying, "This is what you get for being the worst parents ever." It moved quickly through the flames and grabbed them both by the neck. It proceeded to rip their heads clean off their shoulders and threw it in the flames. The creature roared in triumph. The next day, the entire house had completely collapsed. As expected, it attracted police cars in the dozens and fire trucks. They all swarmed the mess that was once a family home. Kenneth stood in the forest path just opposite his former home, smiling. He had made a new friend, one that would never leave, and now he was finally looking forward to Christmas, or at least the doom he could bring upon Christmas.